I don't know if I'm being paranoid, but I think someone has been watching my family at night. I'll try to be brief as possible and stick to the relevant events that are giving me this feeling. But the latest event happened last night, and I didn't get much sleep, so apologies if I ramble or am unclear. My wife and I recently purchased our first home after the birth of our daughter. Everything was as you would expect for the first months. Painting, decorating, renovating, basking in our newfound slice of the American dream. You get the idea. Unusual things started happening several months ago. One day, as I was getting home after work, I passed by a strange truck 2 or 3 houses down from ours. I say strange for a few reasons. We know literally everyone in our small neighborhood, and I've never seen this truck/person before. There's no reason for through traffic to come down our street, and the truck was driving very slowly. Like, put it in drive but don't press on the gas slowly. As I pulled in the driveway, the truck flipped a U-turn and came back towards my house. Getting out of my car, the truck crawled by, and the driver stared daggers at me as he passed, then sped off. I don't like to judge based on appearances, and I like to think that I don't scare easily, but something about this guy's eyes gave me a bad feeling. Obviously, this was weird. I mentioned what happened to my wife, telling her we should be more mindful about security. When I told her the type of truck, my wife said, "That same truck drove by and the guy stared at me when I got home this afternoon. I thought he was just being creepy and checking me out." I tried to tease her a bit to lighten the mood, calling her cocky for assuming any guy driving by was checking her out. I didn't want to freak her out, but I was definitely freaked out. We saw the truck a few more times over the next couple of weeks, either driving by slowly or parked down the block and facing our yard. But one day the truck stopped driving by, and we haven't seen it since. I sort of dismissed the whole thing as me being paranoid. Then other things started happening. In the past month or so, my wife and I have been hearing tapping on the windows at the front of our house at night. It's happened 2 or 3 times to each of us separately, always around 10 or 11 p.m., and always a soft but distinct. It sounds like knocking with a single knuckle on the metal part of a screen door, if that makes sense. The first time that my wife and I heard the tapping together was last weekend. We were in the front room playing with our daughter around 9:30, just about to settle her down for bed. Our front room has a large, almost floor-to-ceiling window running the length of the wall next to the front door, which faces the street. We were all sitting on the floor with our backs to the window, reading our daughter a book, when we heard it. Now, our house is older. Creaks and cracks are not uncommon. But this sound was so distinctly intentional that my wife and I immediately looked at each other and bolted up out of the room. I had my wife and daughter lock themselves in a back room, while I turned on all the lights and did a sweep around the outside of the house. Of course, I didn't see anything, and was ready to dismiss the whole thing as more paranoia over something that probably had an innocent explanation, until last night. Around 9:45, we heard our daughter making a noise in the baby monitor. I waited for a few minutes to see if she would settle down, but when it became clear she wouldn't, I got up to put her back to sleep. The layout of the room is important to visualize this next part. This room is on the side of our house, but the exterior wall juts out a bit in an L shape, and the corner of this L is made up of windows. If you're standing in the door to the room, you're directly across from these windows in one corner, and there's a rocking chair in the other corner, pointed towards the front of the house. One window faces the street, and the other faces our neighbor's house. A garden bed, planted with small shrubs, wraps around the outside of the house, directly underneath. I was sitting in the chair, getting my daughter settled down. I had a lamp on, so the room was softly lit. Once she fell asleep, I stood up to put her in her crib, when something caught my eye. There was a figure standing about, a foot away from the window, in the bare space between the shrubs and the house. They were staring at us. I didn't look long enough to see anything more than what appeared to be a man in a light grey hoodie, standing a few feet away on the other side of the glass. Sprinting from the room, I brought my daughter back to my wife and I's bedroom, leaving her there while telling my understandably confused wife to lock the door. After turning off all the lights inside the house and turning on all the lights outside, I began moving from room to room. Peering out of the windows into the darkness, I couldn't see anything out of the ordinary. Whoever it was must have taken off after seeing me notice them and make a quick exit. Obviously, I had some trouble sleeping after this. I spent hours checking security cameras and going from room to room, looking out windows into the night, hoping, but also not hoping, that I would see anything that could explain what happened. This morning I went outside to the spot where the figure would have been standing. I thought, hoped, maybe there was a plant or something that I mistook for a person. When I got to the spot, I realized the figure had to be standing exactly in a bare patch of ground about 2 feet in diameter, directly in front of that window. Part of me is still hoping that I'm being paranoid. The mind can play tricks on you in the dark, seeing things that aren't there, especially when you're a sleep-deprived new parent. But with everything that's been happening, I can't shake the feeling that there was actually someone out there last night, watching us. Please let me be wrong. Neighborly or creepy? I recently moved into a new neighborhood in the city I live in, and was walking my dog when a man I've seen a few times started talking to me. He was sitting on the stoop of an apartment building 1 street over. My building and his building share the alleyway in the back. He was asking about my dog. He asked my name and I gave it, and he told me his. Everything seemed fine, but I'm a small female and limit my conversations with strangers, especially men, as much as possible, because this happens more frequently than I'd like. Anyway, I would see him every day from that moment on, in the alley, working. Turns out, he is a contractor for that building, and he would consistently hold conversations with me, no matter what I was doing. A few times he offered to give me used furniture from evictions. No, thank you. And would insist on bringing them into my apartment for me. I live with my boyfriend, thankfully. This guy even tried to pressure me into viewing one of the newly renovated apartments that he's working on, but I obviously said no. For one, I don't need an apartment, and 2, I'm definitely not going in there alone with him. One day I was approached again, This time I was getting out of my car to go into my house, and he stopped me and said, "I've been watching your apartment to make sure you're safe. Tell your boyfriend I'm not a bad guy, and I'm only watching for your safety." I said, "Oh, okay. Thanks. Bye." He since followed me a few times driving, but I think he gave up because this was months ago and no sign of him. Just a little creepy. Old man. I'll make this short as possible. I, female, 22, used to work at my local grocery. I worked as a front-end worker, mostly as a cashier. This was my first real job after COVID had started. With the stress of going back home from college, I wanted pocket change and to get out of the house. Skipping through the training and a few rude customers, I didn't mind the work. As time went on, I was the go-to girl to collect the carts outside. I'm 5'2", but live on a farm, so although it was a bit annoying, it was better than standing behind a register. I hadn't paid much attention to my surroundings until I noticed a Honda Fit going around the parking lot a bit oddly. It never parked and eventually made its way over to where I was gathering carts. It was an older white man, looked to be in his 60s. Let's call him Joe. Joe starts talking to me like he's known me since being a small child. I didn't recognize his face with my grandma growing up in the area, and I lived with her. I thought it was another old friend or someone I met once. But I was confused, not to mention how weird he was driving before. After lying about a few things, minus my name, because we had name tags, he left. And I go back inside and talk to a few co-workers about him. Turns out, this freaking creep always chatted up the female cashiers and would often stop them outside, grabbing carts. He even knew the schedule switches. They didn't give it a second thought. For them it was completely normal. I tried it out behind my mind. That is, until Joe made an unwanted comment. I told my boss how Joe made me feel uncomfortable, and she just blew it off. Long story short, I stopped working there once school started back up. I went to pick a few grocery items up today from the same store and was catching up with a few old co-workers. I had completely forgotten about Joe till I saw him today. Joe did try speaking to me, but I had my AirPods on since I don't work there anymore. I just ignored him. "Joe, please, let's not meet again."